Another issue that is seizing Canadians is question of what happens with the Canada-U.S. Mexico trade agreement, whether it survives the Trump administration. Today, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said the North American Trade Pact must change as it goes under review this summer, and he expects those talks to run past July 1st, particularly with Canada.
President Trump has been clear that he is dissatisfied with a lot of the outcomes of USMCA. So while we certainly focus on the provisions, the nature of the provisions, the rules of origin, all these different things, the president is constantly looking at outcomes. We want to resolve as much as we can. We've worked really closely with the Mexicans over the past year. They've resolved a lot of issues. The Canadians, we have some issues with them that haven't been resolved yet. We aren't probably going to be able to resolve all issues by July 1st, but I think we are on track to resolve many of them and to move as quickly as we can.
At the same time, Greer said the U.S. may have to take steps to exit CUSMA in order to continue the talks. Let's talk about that with the Power Panel. Emily, what do you make of those comments from Jamieson Greer? To what extent should they be a concern to Canadians?
I mean, there should be a concern, but once again, I'm going to try to link all topics together. I think CUSMA being negotiated right now just highlights how our economies are interlinked and we're all sort of interdependent. And as we speak, there's actions from within the United States in terms of trying to essentially stop the president. But it's becoming very hard for even my brain, but I think a lot of people's brain, to trying to dissociate the question of how much we trade with the U.S. and how much we're saying what's happening politically and whether or not it impacts where Canada should be going next. The very first question that you asked me in terms of how could Canada be complicit, very specifically, it's about weapons being manufactured in Canada, being commercialized or sold or traded with the U.S. and then being used to do war crimes. So should we have that as a conversation as part of what we do with CUSMA? You know, so it's very complex. There's a lot of business as usual, and we need to have a strong economy, and obviously you want to have a trade within North America. But there is a way in which even this whole segment brings so much cognitive dissonance that we need to be able to put two and two together and ask ourselves those existential questions. And this is what Mark Carney has been doing by trying to, you know, get out of just the dependency on the U.S. and make us deal more with other powers around the world. But I think maybe Canada and Mexico should also be having a side chat at a sidebar on this and trying to figure out how also their trade relationship more strongly as we negotiate CUSMA as well.
Supriya, in many ways, this conversation around Canada-U.S. trade, Mexico, CUSMA, has been quieter than perhaps we might have expected. I mean, certainly some of the folks in the trade world I've talked to have said it's striking to them that Donald Trump hasn't threatened to totally rip the whole thing up in recent memory. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when the bar is super low, like celebrate anything, right? But I think that is a very astute observation, and I would probably, if I had to guess, it's likely because of everything else sort of happening constantly everywhere all at once, right? I think with respect to whether or not Canada should be worried, I'm going to say something that I've said before on the panel, so apologies for repeating myself, but I think we got to think about the long game here. And I think if, you know, I can certainly appreciate that the business community needs, you know, stability and predictability, and a signed CUSMA deal definitely gets us there. But I think it's also important to sort of look at what other countries and jurisdictions like the EU have agreed to in terms of a deal with the U.S. and note that their deals are kind of crappy and not the kind of deal that Canada should be gunning for. So if there is a be calm and, you know, stay calm, carry on kind of thing, I think that the Prime Minister is embodying that vibe quite well. And I think that for all to be said about, you know, side chats and whether or not we should go forward, I would guess some of those are probably happening, you know, those conversations. But I think the best thing for Canada to do is just to be patient. I can certainly appreciate being, you know, antsy if we blow past a July 1st deadline. But I mean, CUSMA is too important to not continue negotiating just because we've gone past July 1st or whatever deadline, you know, that gets set in the future.
Lisa, there's a considerable debate about the extent to which this moment, the uncertainty of this moment, is in some ways could be advantageous to Canada in this review, which is still, it's not a renegotiation. I know that's an important point, but there are still negotiations or conversations happening behind the scenes. Is that instability, does it help Canada because the U.S. is on uncertain footing and they're worried about, the midterms and whatnot, or does it just make it even harder for Canada to get a word in edgewise? What do you think?
It's pretty complex. So let me lay it out as best I can. The July 1st date is important to determine whether or not this deal goes for 10 years or 16 years. That's all that July 1st is about. The reason why we're negotiating is twofold. One, hopefully get a 16-year deal as opposed to a 10-year deal. But more importantly, number two, it's all of these national security tariffs that Trump has placed on Canadian aluminum, steel, auto, etc. Those are the things that Canada is trying to negotiate at the table. And if it's going to be done in the construct of giving something up in CUSMA, then that's how they're going to handle it. By the way, the notion that Trump is going to give 6 months notice and leave this agreement has to go through Congress.
Yes.
And the midterms are coming. So, it's getting darker and darker for him to be able to actually take that opportunity to leave CUSMA. So he doesn't have as many levers as possible, but he's got big ones. He's got national security tariffs. He's got Section 301 investigations into whether or not we have forced labor within our supply chains. Hello, China. These are real issues that Canada has to negotiate away. And if they're going to do it in the construct of CUSMA, then that's great. But otherwise, the CUSMA deal chugs on for the next 10 years. So there's a rush, but not because of you needing a deal on CUSMA. There's a rush because we've got steel, auto, aluminum having big problems.
Indeed. Brad, final word to you.
Yeah, no, I think what the Americans are doing is they are offering to Canadians a lot more of their positioning publicly. So today was about more negotiation in the public, and I don't know if today's remarks were much different from what Trump has said in the past. Mexico we're further along. We've got some area. Last week's list of the airing of the grievances, the Festivus day there, where they listed all the things that they didn't like about Canada, everything from the digital to the cloud to dairy.
The way we say about? No, I'm kidding.
I'm sure that could be on the list. So, and obviously we've got steel, aluminum, and autos, on our list. But I think that, I think the challenge is that Canada is being quiet about how it's pursuing it, and it's making, I think, Canadians anxious because we don't know. Where is our list? Why don't we have a list of our grievances? We have a lot of grievances with the United States, whether they're trade, whether they're security, whether they're things like guns coming over the border. If Trump can put on digital sales tax on his list or supply management, why haven't we put together our airing of grievances to politely push back a little bit? Because I think they were very smart by putting steel and aluminum and autos when they did, because now we're willing to give away things that are already in CUSMA in order to take off the latest tariffs. So where's our list is my question this week.
I would say the new tagline could be Power Panel. It's a lot more than the airing of grievances. Thank you all very much for this conversation. Supriya Dwivedi, Lisa Raitt, Brad Levine, and Émilie Nicolas.